You wouldn't run a 4K video on a 95 Windows operating system. You just wouldn't. The very idea of it would be crazy, it would be ludicrous. So what makes us think that we can transform our beloved auto industry with all of the technology and the change from ICE to BEV and beyond, that we can do that using the same operating system, the same leadership, culture, processes that we've had in this industry for decades? Well, the answer is, you can't. And I can't think of a better person to have on the show to tear into this very question than Terry Woychowski, president of Caresoft. Terry, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Terry, you've had a tremendous career in the auto industry, and you understand it from many different perspectives. You were the global vice president of program management, quality, and vehicle launch for General Motors for many years. You were the chief engineer for full-size SUV and truck. And then if that wasn't enough, you were also the vice chair of SAIC, the JV with General Motors in China. Then you moved into the tier one space, because often I find that OEM people don't understand the tier one space, but you do. You spent time at American Axle, and then like me, you refused to retire because you absolutely love this industry and you want to see it transform, and you want to keep as much of it in Detroit as we possibly can. And so here we are today. You've just come off the stage from the SAA event, and you said your closing comments, it's all about leadership.
Yes.
Why?
Well, yeah, in your opening, you summarized extremely well. Why would you think that the behaviors of the past would change the outcome? Our processes, our procedures, or the way we behave produces what it does. And if you want that to be different, you can't just keep doing things the same way. Things have to change. The auto industry is changing in radically diverse ways and extremely fast. Change is the arena of leadership. That's what leadership is. It's about change. If things aren't changing, quite frankly, I don't think you're leading. You may be managing day to day, just keeping the ball rolling, but leadership says there's a better way. There's something we need. And it doesn't look like this, it's going to look like that. And then the ability to inspire, to motivate, and to resource a team to say, let's move in this direction, and to have people put their hearts and souls into a new way. That's leadership. And that's what's necessary. So change is the arena of leadership, and we won't be able to face the challenges that the industry faces without some pretty significant changes in our leadership behaviors.
Yeah, you remind me of something back in my corporate life. I remember coming into a large tier one running supply chain, and I've always been that change agent, for want of a better term. What do we need to do? What is this thing, supply chain need to look like? How are we aligned with the business? How do we need to change it? And I remember putting together a draft and sitting down with the CEO and saying, this is what I think we need to do based on this, this, and this. What do you think? And I remember him looking at me and he said, oh, you want to change things? And he was quite surprised. And I'm looking at him like, well, isn't that my job? But he didn't see it that way. I think that there is a lot of complacency in the industry. We like to feel comfortable. Human beings like to be comfortable. We have leaders in this system that got there because they behaved a certain way and they followed the processes and they followed the rules, and they're comfortable and they don't want to rock the boat. But you're right, we need people who can say, this is where we're going, to use your words earlier, this is the mission. Yes. Come with me on this mission. This is why this mission is important. That's leadership. I need everybody to go this way with me. Are you with me? Yes or no? People who are with me, and it's going to be tough, and there's going to be good times and bad times, and we're going to be breaking things, and we're going to be arguing and fighting, but we're all going to be in this together, and it's going to be great at the end of the day. Do you want to come with me or not? And some people might say, you know what? That's not for me. I just want to just be in a cube and do my thing. Okay, no problem. And others are like, yes, let's do this. Why don't we have more leaders like that, Terry, in the auto industry?
There's a lot of risk associated with that. It's funny, part of the human nature is that change is a part of life. It is as much as life as breathing is. If you don't see changes, you're not alive. I mean, you have to see the sun there, then it's there, then it's there, you're alive. I feel like this, now I feel like this. We're experiencing change continually. It's part of life. Yet we push against it so much. Yeah. We're so concerned about it because it brings with it an uncertainty, brings with it a risk. There's some scary parts that come with it because I don't know. I know if I do this and this, I'll get this. I don't know if I do this and this, what'll happen. And so it's risky. And unfortunately, when people find themselves in leadership positions, it's typically because they were really good at their last job. And the skills and the talents that they needed to be successful in their last job got recognized. There was an opening and they said, well, boy, she was really good at this. She was the go-to person. Everybody would ask, that should be the next leader. And so you get recognized for that. The problem is that the skills that you need to be a successful leader aren't the same skills that were required when you were an individual contributor and doing your job.
That's so true.
It was certain skills that made you very successful and you were the go-to person. They said, oh, now we need a new supervisor. You're the new supervisor, so you become it. And there were some Italian mathematicians that did a study. And in their study, it was about the success of choosing leaders, the success of choosing supervisors and managers. And their analysis said 50% of the people that we choose to take these positions are successful in them. Well, when your output can be summarized at 50%, you can be replaced with a coin, head or tail.
Yeah.
I wrote an article about it in one of my leadership blogs, and the title of it was, "A Monkey with a Dart Could Do Better Than We Do," in choosing leaders. And I think the reason is we choose the leader who is very good at their job.
Yeah.
And they're unnatural, and so we put them there. But the skill that they need to be successful as a leader of people, we don't train them. We don't equip them. We just say they were good at their job, put them in here, and somehow they're going to matriculate up, they're going to become a great leader. Maybe yes, maybe no. But we don't focus their leadership, their training, the mentoring, what it needs to be successful at this job. And it's different than your previous job. Yeah. And so once this happens to you 2 or 3 or 4 times to where you're getting bigger and bigger assignments and more leadership responsibility, the question comes, are you maturing as a leader? Are you growing? Are you a more effective leader now than you were there? Because, oh, by the way, your responsibilities are bigger now. So bigger shoulders, bigger load. Are you ready to bear up under it? When things start getting very personal, your career is on the line.
Yes.
Your paycheck is on the line. Not many of us come to work with the idea, I'm going to take some big risks today.
Yeah, no, we don't.
Not in the engineering realm, right?
No.
The failure mode effect of us doing things wrong is severe. If we design something, we engineer something and it's wrong, the effect can be fatal. It can be illegal. It can be poor quality. It can be all kinds of bad things. And so we put processes in place to protect that, and we use factors of safety, and we wear belts and suspenders, and we harden our process so we never make mistakes. And the same thing happens when you become a leader. The last thing you want to do is make a mistake. So you'll study a situation ad nauseum, and you will ask experts, and you will pay consultants, and you will do this and this and this so that you won't make a mistake. A leader has to set out and say, well, we're losing sight of the shore. We're going that way. Come with me. And I think this is good. And oh, by the way, as we sail, if we have to make a few adjustments, we'll make them. Be agile.
Yeah.
But let's go. This is an exciting trip.
We talk about safety, and you're right. People want to feel safe. Yeah. And we've created that in this auto industry because of the old command and control days where we would take your head off if you made a mistake. Yeah. So we've created this, right? Yeah. But as I look at the Chinese OEMs, and you know more about the Chinese OEMs and certainly the product than most. This is what you do. You tear down vehicles. You make comparisons. You know how these vehicles are made. But when you think about a Chinese OEM, why is it that they're able to lead and live and design these vehicles without this fear of failure that we so desperately hang on to? Because they're humans too. They have the same fear of failure, they have to. But yet they're able to do it, and we're not. What's your thought on that?
It's a great question. I'll answer a little bit generically. Now, every company would have its own culture and uniquenesses, and each leader was individual. So the answer would probably vary person to person. But some things that I've seen kind of in general is one of the reasons that they're able to move at the speed that they do, which is one of their strategic advantages. Their VDP is about half of a traditional OEM. And there's a couple things there, but one is the front end in simply deciding what you're going to do. And so we spend a lot of time running different studies, and should it be here? Should we sell it in this region or this region? What options should it have? And we study the thing ad nauseum, and partly because we don't want to make a mistake. And we also have this feeling that we kind of have to invent everything in-house. We're very self-sufficient, and we don't trust much on the outside of our walls. I would say very different in China is that part of the speed of their VDP is they make decisions very quickly. This is what we're going to do. And I don't see a lot of hubris. I don't see a lot of ego that says, we've got to do it our way, and it's got to be this, and it has to have our thumbprint on it. And they sometimes say, okay, they've done this. They're looking at a benchmark. They're looking at somebody. And they said, they did this. That company has some very smart people. Let's do that. Others will look, and let's be specific. Let's say take a Tesla that have done many innovative things. Others look at some of the innovative things they do, and they say, well, that won't work. Okay, well, we're looking at it. It's there, and for these reasons, it's not a good idea. And so we're going to study it, and we're going to look at it from this perspective, and does it fit, and all these things. Where the Chinese seem more like they're doing it. They got some really smart people. They've made this decision. We're going to do it. And then they simply trump that by saying, and we're going to do it better. Because they put all the R&D and they iterate. We have the advantage of looking at it now, and we can see, we can polish it like this, we can do it like this, and we can make it even better and even faster and even cheaper and improve upon it. So I think if you can park the ego at the door and say, can I learn? Who can I learn from? And can I just leapfrog from that as opposed to reinventing everything myself? If you have to reinvent the entire car yourself, it's going to take a long time.
Terry, let's go down a little deeper and talk about the design process, something I know you're very, very familiar with. And I'll share a short story with you. I was working for BorgWarner back in the 80s, and I was a feisty young buyer. Torque converters, right? And BorgWarner, in my mind, has always been a very progressive company and still is. And the leader of that business said, we're just starting to talk about concurrent engineering back then in the 80s. So they said, no, we're going to do it. We're going to use a concurrent engineering process for this particular torque converter that we're going to quote to an OEM. So they physically put us together. I represented purchasing and supply chain. There was, believe it or not, we had a maintenance guy off the shop floor. We had a product design engineer, and we had a manufacturing engineer, and I think we had one or two other people. It was the 80s. I can't remember exactly. But we physically co-located together. And people were like, what are you doing? And we're like, oh, we're the concurrent engineering team. But we had two tasks. One was to concurrently engineer this product, but it was also to look at the process and redefine the processes that went along with it. And we all went to training. We went to the old Boothroyd and Dewhurst DFM, DFA. I'm bringing back memories. I can see by the look on your face.
I have a certificate somewhere.
I think I do too, yeah. But I went through that training, and we did all the right things. We brought in the mold makers. We brought in the steel suppliers way, way early on in the process. Before the designs had been finalized, we did everything the way that you would think that we should be doing it. Now, this was the early 80s, it might have been 84, 85, right? It was a long time ago. And then we redefined the processes, and the project was hailed as a success. And we put those processes in a black binder, and it went up on a shelf. Here we are in 2025, and I can tell you absolutely positively from the rest of my career in automotive to what I see happening today, those processes have not taken hold in automotive. We do not know how to really concurrently engineer product. I'm very focused on the supply base, obviously, because of my background. But bringing suppliers in early, because that means you got to select them early. And nobody wants to do that because, God forbid, we might miss 2 pennies if you go to supplier B instead of supplier A. So why, Terry, we know that 80% of the cost of the product is hooked in at the design phase. We know what to do. Why have we not been able to do that?
Because it's hard.
Yes, it's hard.
That's such a great illustration because we know how to do it. One of the things we do here at Caresoft is when we disassemble vehicles, we're always looking for muda. We're looking for waste.
Yes.
Where is the part costing more than it needs to do its job? Or where is it heavier than it needs to be? Or where is it driving more labor to assemble? Especially as we compare you with your toughest competitors, efficiencies. The cause of why are you inefficient, after you've done this enough times, you start seeing some real trends. Specifications. You have specifications that aren't competitive compared to these guys. You're engineering to this standard or this performance specification, whatever it is, and they're doing to this. And so you're driving cost into your product that they're not. And if you're competing on the MSRP, you're at a deficit there. We're a victim of our own specifications. Those specifications come about from a myriad of reasons. Oftentimes it's, we had a problem.
Yes.
And so we put some boilerplate around it.
Exactly.
We increased our factor of safety, whatever we did, because irreversible corrective action is magic words. Oh, I've taken irreversible corrective action. That means it'll never happen again, boss.
Yeah, until it does.
We're smarter, we're stronger, it'll never happen again. Okay,
Yeah.
good, you can come back tomorrow, keep going. Another reason why designs are inefficient is a lack of integration. Whenever I see a bracket, my radar lights up a bit. And this is back from our DFA, DFM training. I think that's what primed the pump, but I see a bracket, and to me it says, okay, I have 2 parts that need to work together, and they don't. So now I get to pay a third engineer to make a bracket, and someone to buy some bolts, and I have to pay somebody to put the brackets on and to drive these bolts and all this. Because these pieces need to work together, and they don't. We come in with this third part. That's because it's not well integrated. And I'm sure that part's a fine part, and that part's a fine part, but you two need to work together, and you didn't. And therefore, I need to patch you up. It always reminds me, the psalmist wrote, I'll praise you because I'm beautifully and wonderfully made. If he was an engineer, he'd say, I'll praise you because I'm beautifully and wonderfully integrated. We are integrated like crazy. I have a bicep, and I have a tendon, and I have a bone. But if you look, that muscle it's muscle for sure. And this tendon's tendon for sure, but if you look at between them, they start to fuzzy up. And right in the middle, you can't tell, is that a bone or a tendon? And then when the tendon comes into the bone, it just sort of starts to fuse and become crystallized and calcified, and it gets real blurry. So it's very distinct, and yet it blurs at the interface. No bolts, no rivets. What an incredible design. And the fact of the matter is, as a customer, I don't care if I have a bicep or a tendon or a bone. I want coffee. I just want motion.
Yes.
I want force and motion.
Yes.
This is what I want. I want it to work seamlessly. And our customers, they want the products to work seamlessly. Nobody wants to buy a bracket. So do you really want to buy a bracket?
No.
We call that non-value add. Mm-hmm. And so when we can call out non-value add, what's left is valuable. And that's what we're after. It's hard work to integrate because we like to organize ourselves into like fashions so that we can drive a common standard, we like to call it global common standard practice. So when I do brake drums, I do brake drums, and this is how I do brake drums, and this is how I know this is our brake drum. And we're the smartest people in the world, and we know how to make brake drums better than anybody else in the world knows how. And so this is how we'll make brake drums. And then somebody else will make calipers, and somebody else will make wheels, and somebody else. And would you be surprised that they don't even talk to each other? I have a friend, Kurt Studel. Kurt was the director of the Department of Transportation in Michigan. So he's responsible for all our roads. Fantastic, a good friend. We served together on the board of directors of Engineering Society of Detroit. When we were talking, he said something that amazed me. He spent his whole career making roads in the state of Michigan. And in that time, he never once spoke to a tire engineer. Never once. His whole reason for being is a tire. It's 4 patches the size of your palm, and your life depends on it.
Yes.
And he talked to plenty of construction people. He talked to asphalt people. He talked to all these things to build the road, but didn't integrate with the user of the thing. I've been to some OEMs who integrate well, and I'm always amazed because I see long engineering tables, and I mean long picnic tables that go 100 yards, and people with a couple screens and a keyboard, but I never see anybody sitting there working without 2 or 3 people talking over their shoulders with a whiteboard. And if you look and if you listen, you realize, oh, that's the manufacturing guy there, and that's the engineer.
Yes.
And see that one with the bewildered look is the purchasing agent. He doesn't even know what these guys are doing, but he needs to make some sense of this. And they're working together as a small team to tackle this. And you wonder, well, why are they so innovative? It's like, you're seeing it right here. And they're solving tough problems. A simple thing like installing a wiring harness in a vehicle. That's a tough job. If you work on a line and you install a wiring harness, my hat's off to you. That is a tough job, especially in these EVs, because some of these things, I refer to them as a copper anaconda. As you're wrestling this huge, heavy cable. But you have to go from the underhood compartment into the vehicle. Mm-hmm. And so there are some where you have to fish it through a little hole, and then you have to seat a seal on a plug, and then have to secure it. But I see where one of the Teslas, there is a connector on both sides of the controller, and the controller nests inside the front of dash, and you just snap it in on this side, and the other one you just snap it in on that side. And there's a connection on both sides of this thing. I go, well, that's clever. How much labor did you take out? How much effort? How did you improve your throughput? How did you improve your quality? But you did. And so we are a victim of our process. And we don't put enough emphasis or enough value in our process because our process dictates what we do and how we do it. But it's sort of like, well, that's relegated to some process folks, program management folks, it is what it is. But the truth of the matter is, it is of paramount importance, your process, because it's going to dictate what you do, how you do it, and the time it takes you to do it, and ultimately the cost. And it is a leadership issue at the end of the day to say, I own the process in this company. At least I own the fact that we have a process.
Yeah.
We may have a dozen people whose job is to massage it and document it and look for Kaizen opportunities and those types of things. We don't go about this well. As we organize ourselves in functional areas because it's the function that we're focused on. But that's not what the customer.
No.
They want a complete product. They want an integrated product and an efficient product. They want it to be affordable, and they don't want to simply pay for your bureaucracy or waste that comes from your internal processes.
When we look at the legacy auto industry, we've got a lot of history and we've got a lot of good processes.
Sure.
But that also holds us back. With a company starting from a clean sheet of paper, as the Chinese OEMs did. So they're unencumbered by all the legacy processes, which can help them and hurt them.
Exactly.
Right? So they've got to have a balance of both of those. But do you think that there's a different style of leadership required at different phases of the product? For example, during the design phase, during the very early phases when you're maybe really playing with ideas, maybe working with startup companies, do you think that's a different kind of leadership? Because that's more of the Musk, go fast, break things kind of mentality. That's not a great mentality to have when the vehicle is launched and you're in full-scale production. Do you think those are different kinds of leaders, or how do you see that?
Probably.
Yeah.
But I will say if we look at Tesla, they're more the former that you just described, much more agile and let's go do this.
Yeah.
I want a body in white with no floor. Why? I have a great big piece of metal, and this far below it I have another great big piece. Why do I have two? Well, the reason you have two is because you have a body group. And when a body group makes a body, there's a floor.
Yeah.
You always have been, always will be. It's got to have a place to put your feet. And that's a battery, and boy, Freddie Kilowatt lives in there. We're not letting him out. So I'm going to give you that as a little vault.
Yeah.
When I present that battery to you, it's going to be safe. Now you can bolt the two together and we have a car. And they're at a position where they say, no, I'm not going to buy two pieces of metal, I want one piece of metal. So you make the top of the battery the floor of the car. Well, there'll be all kinds of people say why you can't do that.
Yes.
Because it won't be stable. There's 100 reasons why. But there is a reason to say, we'll figure that out. We can do that. And they do. And so the vehicle's more efficient. When a whole big piece of metal is gone, all the mass, all the cost isn't there. The vehicle's got a 14% efficiency improvement by that one move. So up front, that's moonshot kind of thing.
Yes.
Let's do this. There's got to be a better way to do this. Let's figure it out. The thing about Tesla you see, and I think a lot of the Chinese as well, is almost a reckless abandon to continually change and continually improve, even when it's in serial production. When I was at GM and others, it was like change was seen as the enemy of quality.
Yes.
Because when you change something,
there's risk.
There's risk, and there can be quality escape points you didn't comprehend or didn't see, and something can happen. There's nothing better than doing the same thing time in, time out,
right.
time in, time out. I do this job 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, the same way every time. That's a real good way to guarantee quality. That's why a lot of times I laugh when the J.D. Power best-in-class quality comes out, the vehicle you're about to go out of production with, because you've been making it for so long, and it's been hands-off. You haven't been tampering with it, and they just make the thing, and it's extremely good quality. Where a lot of the startups and a lot of the Chinese, they said, that's a better idea than this.
Do it.
Do it. Yeah. Do you get better range? Yeah, we need better range. Do it. Does it reduce cost? Yes, do it. We got to get the cost out of this thing. And we say, well, we've invested this much. We've got all this sunk cost. We've got this capital. Yeah. You're asking me to obsolete this capital, and the last thing we want to do is obsolete capital in a capital-intensive environment. And so we have all this inertia and antibodies to making change. And they look and just say, change it, change it, change it. You look at a Tesla and these EVs, you have these huge batteries, 400 volt, 800 volt batteries. But there's also a 12 volt battery. There's a low voltage side to control this stuff. Well, in their first vehicles, it was a lead acid battery, 12 volt lead acid battery, just like we've known forever. One day, it was gone and a lithium ion 12 volt battery was sitting there. And it went from, approximate the numbers, but from 11 kilograms to 1.
Yeah.
10 kilograms, gone. Just that fast. In a vehicle, that range is extremely important because it's one of the barriers to entry. It's one of the reasons people don't want an EV is they're concerned about range. And so making decisions that are going to help range becomes paramount. Will this help range? Yeah, absolutely. And so do it. I really think if you want to know what's in a Tesla, you need to tear one down about every 6 months. Because they change
because they change so much.
At that rate.
Yes.
And it's just like, oh, what is this? Oh, this is new. Oh, my goodness, look what they've done here. And so that's part of that first leadership mindset, approach that carries through serial production. Now, they're still young. They still have a smaller portfolio. And so we're not always comparing apples and apples. So you look at some of the OEMs. It's like I tell people, it's easier to put 2 children through college than 12. Right, so you have this portfolio of all these vehicles, and you have to send them all to college.
Yeah.
And one thing, you say, well, I got this one, and I was going to fix it up. And says, okay, well, that's a little easier to do. So they're all coming from a different place. But at the end of the day, the philosophy of what are we going to do, how are we going to do it, the risks that we're willing to take, I think that's what sets us apart. There's so many of us that we're just risk adverse.
Let's talk about your leadership, Terry, over the years. Who are you as a leader? And I'm interested in how your leadership has evolved over the years and what you've learned.
From my perspective, some elements, I would say, the foundation of my leadership haven't changed at all. I believe that leadership is based on a hunger for things to be better than they are, a vision that this would be better. And I think a leader needs to be hungry. If you're not hungry and not making things change, you're not leading. And so there's got to be that hunger to say, yeah, we're here, but this isn't good enough. This won't last. It should be like this. That hunger has been an element of my leadership. I've also believed that a leader needs to be honeable, which is a word we don't use very often, but if you have a knife and if you want your knife to remain keen, sharp, dangerous, effective, it has to be drug against the hone. It has to be continually honed. It's anthropomorphic to think that the blade has feelings, but if it did, the blade doesn't want to be drug against the hone. That would hurt. That scrapes. That burns. But a leader needs to be honeable. So you need to be willing to be drug across the hone, and you need to be willing to learn. Always. There's always something to learn and to get better. Do you want to be sharp? Yeah. Do you want to be effective? Yeah. Do you want to be dangerous? Yeah. Then be willing to be drug against the hone because it hurts. But you have to pay that to be a good leader. And I think I've been drug against the hone oftentimes, regardless. And then you need to be honorable. At the end of the day, your word needs to be your bond. You have to, if you say you're going to do this, I think you, to who you've said it to, you owe it to yourself to do that. You need to be honorable. And so that hasn't changed. What has changed is part of being a leader is understanding I'll say the chemistry, or maybe we call it the culture of your leadership environment. And how do you fit in?
Yeah.
And can you be effective within that?
Yeah, the values. The
Borg-Warner leadership structure and chemistry was such to say, let's go do this. But if you could have gone to another company, it might have been very different. Mm-hmm. And I can say, going from General Motors, there was a certain persona, there was a certain characteristic, and how do I get along with my peers, and how can I be effective in helping move this organization forward? And that's very different than American Axle. Very different. And that's very different than Link. That's very different than being an entrepreneurial startup like Caresoft.
Yes.
There I had processes, and there I had discipline there, and here it's like, holy cow,
yeah.
There's an idea, let's go try this.
Let's go do it, yeah.
The ability to be a little bit of a chameleon and say, can you adapt to that environment? That's probably how my leadership has changed as much, because you do have to change and throttle how you behave, depending on what's acceptable around here, what's effective around here. For 2 years in my career at GM, I was part of a prisoner exchange. And the engineers and the manufacturing guys didn't get along, almost by nature. The engineers guy said, you guys are lazy, you just want to be able to throw the parts away from 6 feet away and have them stick. It doesn't work that way. And the plant would look at the engineers and say, listen, I'm not building a damn watch. You're going to need to make these things so I can have a fighting chance of building in-station quality, in-station, and cycle. So because we had this tension, our leaders decided, hey, let's get a couple engineers and get them in manufacturing, a couple manufacturing guys get them in engineering, let them do each other's job, and maybe they'll come out of this a little bit better. One day I read in my inbox that I had been moved to Pontiac East Assembly, and I was going to run a paint shop. So I called up our VP and I said, hey, I just read this on the inbox. He said, what do you mean in the inbox? I said, that's where I saw it. HR didn't talk to you? No. I said, no, I'm not worried about HR. I said, you really want me to go this? He said, yeah, and he explained why this was a good idea. I said, okay. I said, I just want you to know, I'm colorblind. And I will put red doors on a green truck and ship it all day long. It doesn't mean anything to me. Know. And he just paused. He said, don't go away. He made some calls, called back. He said, listen, you got great superintendents. Trust them. Want you there. I said, okay, well, I'll just have them measure the colors and the intensities and plot them. We'll just do it with math. And he said, see, that's why we want you there. We want that kind of mindset in the plant. I got to go to the plant and work. Really very difficult. 1,224 trucks a day, 5 days a week, 3 shifts. I don't think I slept a full night in 2 years. One day, I'd asked my repairman supervisors to do something because we had a series of unfortunate events. And I said, it's because you don't have the right structure. I want you to go build this so that we can do this. And it had to do with repairs. And every time you have to put something through repair, you're losing throughput of what good sale, because you're repairing something, and it was a mess. And they didn't do it. And then they were repairing something, and they hit that with a fork truck. So now we were like 2 or 3 deep. And it's like, look at this. Well, and I can remember pulling them in my office, and I do remember this quite vividly. It was the first time I ever cussed at GM. I was an engineer, I was a professional, and I remember I was so mad because I'd told them what to do, they hadn't done it, and bad things had happened. And nothing makes me more angry than to be able to know something could be happening, give direction so that I avoid it. It doesn't get followed through, and the bad thing happens. And I just feel like a failure when that happens. And when I feel like a failure, I get mad at you, So I call these guys in. And I remember just dressing them down. I told you, bap, 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 bap. And I cussed. I know that they spun on their heels, and they took off straight out of my office. And I know they were going to execute exactly what I told them to do. So I sat down at my desk, and no sooner did they leave than the plant manager and the production manager walk in my office. They had been standing in the hallway and heard everything that I said. And so I was sitting here already feeling like a failure the way I behaved. And then I look at them though, and they heard it. My boss heard that, and they're right there. And it's like, okay, well, this has been a good career. Do I have a box I can start packing? And they came in and walked around my desk, and they gave me the most hearty hugs and pats on the back. And the comment was this: welcome to the plant. We wondered how long it would take you to adapt.
Yes.
And they were so proud of me that I'd written these, and I was like, I feel the worst I've ever felt, and you guys are congratulating me. But see, what happened to the culture was, and they taught me this with time, when you talk, they take it as dialogue. If you cuss, they take it as direction.
Oh, interesting.
A leadership lesson.
It is a cultural lesson right there.
So it's what environment are you in, and how can you be effective in that? And when you take a new job, especially as a leader, that's understanding the company and its financials is one thing, understanding their product and where it is and where it's going is a whole nother thing. You can figure all that out.
Yes.
How am I going to fit culturally? What's the chemical makeup here? Will I fit? That's a whole lot question to answer.
Yes.
And if you know people and have a relationship, that's one thing that helps that. But otherwise, that's kind of a crapshoot. And that's why you see a lot of people take a new job in a new company. They come from
That's right. They move.
Shortly after, they're moving.
They're gone.
And it's because they weren't effective. Their leadership style wasn't effective in that particular environment.
Well, we have a lot of leaders, obviously, in the auto industry listening to this podcast, Terry. OEM and Tier 1 and Tier 2. If you were to give them a piece of advice, give them a starting point. If they're at the point that they understand that leadership and culture has to change in order for us to survive in this industry, where do they even begin? Where do they start?
The fact of the matter is, for many of the traditional OEMs, they face what I refer to as an existential threat.
Yeah.
Okay. The threat from the changes that are happening in the industry and the pressures that are coming from the China auto industry, and these things that threatens your existence. If you don't change, it's a fatal threat. So you must change. And there are gaps that need to be closed. There's a technological gap. These guys are making mega castings. We don't mega cast anything. So you've got to learn that. How do I do that? But they're actually quite gifted at closing technical gaps, right? You've got R&D groups, you've got smart engineers, you've got smart people. There's a financial gap in many of these that has to be negotiated, and that's why I think CEOs and CFOs make as much money as they do, as they configure their way through mergers, acquisitions, the things that are necessary to make sure that the finances are there and necessary to invest in what you need to do to make it. There's another gap, and this is the stunning one, this is the tough one, and there's a cultural gap. And if that's not closed, you're not going to close. You're going to stay threatened. And so, to me, that's the biggest challenge. It's the biggest challenge to the senior leaders of the companies, is because they own the culture. You know, a lot of times they'll look to HR.
Yes.
And they'll look to consultants and say,
that's right.
okay, let's re-engineer the culture in this company.
No, it's on you, leader.
Don't waste your time.
No, it's on you.
It's
on you.
Work.
Yeah.
This is a time for that kind of bold leadership. This is a time where calm is really an incredible value for a leader.
Yes.
To be calm.
Yes.
We're facing an existential threat. We know how to address this. We'll figure this out. We have what it takes. It also is a time for some frank, it's just the truth. What's the truth of the situation? There's a saying, I saw it on a poster here at work. Somebody copied something I said and put it on the wall. But it is something I say often. The greatest gift you can give to a person is the truth. Because if you're armed with the truth, at least you can make intelligent decisions.
Yeah.
And you can better your situation and you can move in the right direction. It's when you don't have the truth that you're just kind of wandering. You need to be able to let people understand the truth. And a lot of people are isolated from the truth. You just come in every day, do your job. Here's my process. Here's my desk. Here's my office. I got to work from home for a couple of years because of a virus. Now I got to get back into the office and do that. And this is how I do this. And that's a whole different thing than saying, go to the Shanghai Auto Show and go walk the floor.
Yeah.
And come home absolutely shaken to your core. And understand that there are people who come to work every day and their job is to take food off your table and put it on theirs. That's the threat we face. They're not in this thing for a fair fight. They're in here to eat you. Don't make a mistake about it. And if we don't change, they will. And so you have to have the courage to admit that. But I think there's a culture of being gentler and kinder and everybody's happy. And it's like, I don't want to upset people. Hey, if you're facing an existential threat, you'd better let everybody know.
Yeah.
And then you have to be able to chart a course forward and point. This is where we're going. This is what we need to do. And as you framed it earlier in the conversation, to inspire them, motivate them, make them want to be a part of that. Next thing you know, they're almost happy that they're in this journey.
What I'm hearing you say is that step one is really to understand that there's a problem, to recognize this existential threat that we have with the Chinese OEMs. I think we're insulated from it here in the US somewhat because we don't see the Chinese vehicles on the road. I was in the UK 2 months ago. Every other vehicle practically is an MG, which of course some people think I had an MG when I was 17, but it was British owned then. It's a Chinese owned company. I mean, there are Chinese vehicles everywhere. First step is to admit you have a problem. Right?
Exactly right.
We have a problem in this industry. But then what I'm hearing you say is we need this kind of mission-driven leadership.
Yes.
And then from our conversation today, what I heard was basically you've covered a lot of the traits of authentic leadership, whereas truth, speak the truth, speak truth to power, be comfortable in your own skin, treat people well, but also recognize that there is accountability. And when you have personal credibility and you make promises and commitments, you rally people around this mission, you drive that sense of accountability, which isn't a bad word, not in a way where you berate people. I'm not talking about that, but personal commitment. Then you've got something that will really move the needle, and then you start to change the culture and the processes, and you start to question things. You made me think of going back to my concurrent engineering days. Do you know, we tore apart every print and every specification on every print and read every specification. You know as well as I do that prints get carried over from one platform to the next. And sometimes there's a specification on there, and I am not lying, some of these specifications were drafted before I was born, and that's saying something, right? But we just go on, don't we? We just go, and we copy them over, and we go, oh, yeah. This is what I get from you. Admit there's a problem. Get the right kind of motivational leadership that's mission-driven. I believe that you and I both are on this mission to change this industry. And you know what, Terry? We are going to do it. We are absolutely going to do it. But I am not going to let you go from this conversation until we talk about some personal stuff. Now, we have more in common than our love of this industry. And I did not know that until your speech earlier today. We both grew up on dairy farms in small towns.
Yes.
You in Bad Axe, Michigan, me in Coity in South Wales in the UK. My father, at the start of his farming career, also farmed with horses and plows, as did your grandfather. I remember the tractor. The tractor is everything in the world of the farming community. It was a Massey Ferguson, and it was red. And I remember it today, and I spent a lot of my childhood sitting on that tractor with my dad, herding cattle. And yet here we are. We didn't follow in those farming footsteps, did we?
No, we didn't. One of my jobs was, as a young lad, was to get up real early. Cold, hot, didn't matter, get up. And I had a scoop shovel and a wheelbarrow, and there was a gutter on the south side of a northbound herd of dairy cows. And my job was to empty that gutter, scoop all this manure,
Yep.
and clear it out. Now, where you have cows, you have manure. That's just it. We come
Yes,
together.
you do.
But you never have manure that's more than a few hours old. Because there are parasites and there are things that are
Yes.
bad. And so we clean them out, we put them out in a pile, and then later we'll go and cast it out into the fields for fertilizer. So it was my job. Growing up, I didn't know much, but I knew I don't want to be a farmer because I don't like to get up early and I don't like shoveling manure. So I end up in the global automotive industry. Well, I had to get up even earlier. And I shoveled manure my whole career.
Isn't that true?
You're not going to get away from it.
Isn't that true? Yes, yeah. I know. When I started with Borg Warner in Wales, I remember my mother calling me down off the field because I was riding my horse in the field at the time. And this is obviously way before cell phones and pages and all of that, right? And she said, this company, Borg Warner, I think you have an interview there. And it was in the purchasing department. I was an assistant at Borg Warner. But it was such a great company. It really formed me as a leader. And I will be forever grateful to them because they took a chance on me early on in my career. And they sent me to Muncie, Indiana to work on a project. And I was 23, I think. I thought that they had picked me because I was special and maybe smart. They really picked me because nobody else wanted to do it. Nobody else wanted to transfer this inventory, this transmission project back to Muncie, Indiana. But I learned so much from that, and I will be forever grateful to them. But there's so much good in this industry that you and I have seen, have touched, have felt in the legacy auto industry. But we have to continue, Terry, to do everything in our power to move this industry forward. And I can't even begin to tell you how much of a pleasure it has been to have you on the show today and to get inside your mind a little bit. So thank you.
It was my pleasure. I enjoy it. I am a total failure at retirement.
Yeah, me too.
And it's because I want to be part of the solution.
Yes.
I see this existential threat. I believe it is threatening. And I see the ramifications of what will happen. This would be devastating. And I would like to be part of the solution, however I can be. And so Caresoft has a little sliver of opportunity to get some of these insights and to help work with some of our customers to be much more competitive.
Yeah.
And to face this. And that's what I want to do. And there's something to learn every day. Things are honestly changing at that rate of speed. It's like, if you didn't learn something today, it's because you didn't have your eyes open.
That's right.
Going on. And that's good. Growing up on the farm, one thing you learn is, I'll say, some of that
work
that
ethic.
you bring, like your work ethic and your word. Did you give your word? Then you will move heaven and earth to accomplish what you just said. And the clock isn't going to stop you, and this roadblock's not going to stop me. I have a mission to accomplish, and I'll do that. And you become resourceful. Okay? Tractor broke. Oh, take it to the dealer. No, you can't take it to the dealer. This thing cracked. Okay. You go drill a hole in the end of the crack. Go get
you
the
figure it
welder,
out.
weld it up, and if the sun is still up there, climb back up there and keep going. I have a horse ranch now, and my children all have their homes on our homestead, and my grandsons are there. And we were moving some logs the other day to put on our sawmill. Big oak logs. They weigh thousands of pounds. And so we were moving them, and we're done. We got the log on the mill, and it started to sprinkle. So I looked at my grandson. He's a scrapping 8-year-old. And I said, bring me that logging chain, because we needed to roll up. We needed to put tools away before the rain. And so he bent down, he picked up this chain, he picked it, and I could just see his face, and he's going, good grief, this is heavy, you know. And he put it down. And so I watched for a moment. What's going to happen here? And I think he's kind of looking around and kind of thinking. And so I turned to him and I said, bring me that chain. And so he snapped to and he got done and he just mustered the strength and he pulled that chain over. So I grabbed it. Thank you. And I went over. We hung the chains up. And half hour later or so, we were together and I called him over. And I said, now it's the lesson time. So I asked you to bring me the chain. He said, yes, sir. He said, is it heavy? And he said, yes, sir. I said, young man, you're going to have to lift a lot of heavy things. Just because it's heavy doesn't mean you're not going to get it and not
Yeah.
going to do it. You're going to cowboy up here and do what's necessary to get this thing accomplished. Mission focused.
Yes.
Your mission is to get me that chain.
Yes.
I don't care if you have to bring it over link by link. I don't care. Get it over here.
Yeah.
Figure it out. And that little young man just learned a life lesson.
And Terry, that is a beautiful lesson. And it is a great way to close, because leadership is all about helping people see that they are capable of more than they think they are capable of accomplishing. And that is a classic example. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us.
Jan, it was my pleasure. I sure appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.